Life after the divorce had been relatively calm and uneventful. The scars from the separation were slowly healing, and I had finally settled into a peaceful routine in my quaint little house. It was a cozy place, filled with memories of better times, and I cherished it as my sanctuary. On that particular day, the sun hung low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the neighborhood. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees in my backyard, creating a soothing melody. I had just returned from work, tired but looking forward to the solace of my home. As I turned the corner onto my street, a sense of anticipation washed over me. The thought of relaxing in my own space, perhaps indulging in some homemade comfort food, was a welcome prospect. Little did I know that this day would be anything but ordinary. I parked my car in the driveway and walked up to the front door, ready to step inside and leave the worries of the world behind. But as I inserted my key into the lock and turned it, a strange and unsettling feeling washed over me. The key didn't turn as it should have. I removed it and tried again, but with the same frustrating result. Panic began to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. I checked the key, thinking it might be damaged, but it appeared perfectly fine. With trembling hands, I attempted to insert it once more, but this time I was met with a horrifying realization: the lock had been changed. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the unfamiliar lock before me. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I hadn't changed the locks, and no one else had any reason to do so. My mind raced, trying to come to terms with this bizarre and distressing situation. I stepped back from the door, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. I couldn't fathom how this had happened. My house was supposed to be my refuge, a place of safety and familiarity, and now I was locked out of it. Staring at the unfamiliar lock on my front door, I was paralyzed by a mix of anger, disbelief, and sheer panic. The realization that someone had intentionally changed the locks to my house was both bewildering and infuriating. I knew I had to take immediate action. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. While waiting for him to answer, I pounded on the door, hoping to get the attention of whoever was inside. My heart raced with each passing moment. Finally, my lawyer picked up, his voice a calming presence in the midst of chaos. I explained the situation in hurried, disjointed sentences, emphasizing that I needed help right away. He assured me that he would be there as soon as possible and instructed me not to do anything rash. As I hung up the phone, I noticed a curtain move slightly in the living room window. Someone was inside. I called out, demanding to know who was in my house, but there was no response. The silence only added to the sense of unease that had settled over me. I glanced around my yard, half expecting to see my ex-mother-in-law lurking somewhere nearby, wearing that sly, triumphant smile that had haunted my dreams for years. Margaret was the only person I could think of who would go to such lengths to torment me. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for my lawyer to arrive. The sun continued its descent in the sky, casting long shadows across the front yard. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door, wondering what kind of confrontation awaited me on the other side. When my lawyer finally pulled into the driveway, I felt a glimmer of hope. He was a seasoned attorney with a reputation for handling complex cases, and I trusted him to guide me through this ordeal. As he approached, he looked at the changed lock and nodded, determination etched on his face. Together, we would confront the shocking revelation of my ex-mother-in-law's audacious actions and begin the legal battle to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Chapter 2 marked the beginning of our journey to uncover the truth behind the lock change and the sinister motives behind it. My lawyer and I stood on the doorstep, staring at the changed lock that symbolized an intrusion into my life. As the minutes passed, we realized that whoever was inside my house had no intention of coming out voluntarily. It was time to confront the unthinkable, facing my ex-mother-in-law, Margaret. With a deep breath and a sense of trepidation, I shouted through the door, "Margaret, I know you're in there." Open this door immediately. My voice quivered with a mix of anger and anxiety. The tension in the air was palpable. For what felt like an eternity, there was no response. The silence was deafening. I could hear the faint chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic, but there was no sign of movement from inside the house. My lawyer, who'd been making calls to the local authorities while I attempted to communicate with Margaret, joined me in addressing her through the door. He explained the legal ramifications of her actions and strongly urged her to come out and resolve the situation peacefully. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing Margaret's face, her expression a chilling mix of smug satisfaction and defiance. She'd always been a formidable adversary, and her icy demeanor sent shivers down my spine. Margaret coolly informed us that she had purchased my house for a mere $2 million. She believed she had every right to change the locks, as the house was now her property. Her words cut through me like a knife. I knew this was a legal battle, but her brazenness was beyond belief. My lawyer vehemently contested her claims, stating that the sale of my house had never been discussed or agreed upon. Margaret's actions were not only unethical but also illegal. The battle lines had been drawn, and we were determined to fight for justice. As tensions continued to rise on the doorstep, Margaret's confidence began to waver. She realized that this would not be an easy victory, that there were legal consequences to her actions. With grit and determination, I decided that I would not be intimidated or bullied any longer. The confrontation with Margaret at my front door had been tense, to say the least. Her audacious claim that she had purchased my house for a paltry $2 million and her insistence on changing the locks had set the stage for a legal showdown. With my lawyer by my side, we decided it was time to escalate the matter. Margaret's actions were not just unethical. They were illegal, and we were prepared to hold her accountable. My lawyer immediately informed her that we would be pursuing legal action to contest her supposed ownership of the house. Margaret's smug expression wavered, giving way to a momentary flicker of doubt. She was well aware that the legal system did not favor those who attempted such underhanded schemes. Still, she remained obstinate, claiming that she had done nothing wrong. The first step in our legal battle was to secure a temporary restraining order, preventing Margaret from taking any further actions that could harm me or my property. This order would also allow me to regain access to my house while the legal proceedings were underway. As we worked with the authorities to obtain the restraining order, Margaret's world began to unravel. She had not anticipated the level of resistance she would face, nor the scrutiny her actions would undergo. Her audacity had been her downfall. Over the coming days, legal documents were filed, and the case was set in motion. My lawyer assured me that the evidence was on our side, as the sale of my house had never been legitimate. Margaret's attempts to cut corners and execute the transaction without my knowledge or consent would not go unnoticed by the court. The legal battle became all-consuming, with depositions, hearings, and negotiations dominating our lives. It was a taxing and emotionally draining experience, but I was resolute in my determination to regain control of my home. As the legal proceedings began to unfold, it became increasingly evident that Margaret's purchase of my house was far from straightforward. Her audacious attempt to acquire my home at a mere $2 million had not only raised eyebrows, but had also triggered a thorough investigation into her actions. My lawyer, who had a keen eye for the intricacies of such cases, started to uncover a web of deceit that stretched beyond the boundaries of the attempted property sale. It appeared that Margaret had not only targeted my home, but had also engaged in a series of questionable financial dealings. One of the most shocking revelations was that Margaret had managed to secure the purchase of my house without my knowledge or consent. She had cut corners, manipulated paperwork, and taken advantage of a moment of vulnerability in my life to push forward with her scheme. The authorities began to scrutinize the transaction, and it became evident that Margaret had made dubious deals with individuals who'd questionable reputations in the real estate market. It was as if she'd been willing to do anything to acquire my house for an unbelievably low price. As the investigation deepened, more and more irregularities came to light. There were discrepancies in the paperwork, shady financial transactions, and a pattern of behavior that suggested a calculated attempt to acquire property at a fraction of its actual value. For me, it was a disheartening revelation. The house that had once been a symbol of my independence and a sanctuary of peace had become entangled in a sordid web of deceit. I couldn't help but wonder how Margaret had become so entangled in her own web of lies. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Margaret remained defiant, refusing to admit any wrongdoing. She continued to insist that the sale of the house was legitimate and that she had acted within her rights. It was a testament to her stubbornness and her belief that she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. With each passing day, the investigation into Margaret's actions revealed more unsettling details about the extent of her recklessness and greed. It became evident that her audacious attempt to acquire my house at a bargain price was just the tip of the iceberg. The authorities had uncovered a pattern of risky financial endeavors that Margaret had engaged in to secure the funds for the house purchase. It appeared that she had invested everything she had, including her own savings, into a series of dubious ventures. Her once seemingly stable financial situation had been transformed into a house of cards ready to crumble. One of the most shocking discoveries was Margaret's involvement with individuals known for their unscrupulous business practices. It seemed that she had been willing to associate with anyone who could help her achieve her goals, even if it meant treading on the wrong side of the law. Margaret's empire, built on deception and avarice, was teetering on the brink of collapse. The financial transactions she had engaged in were under intense scrutiny, and it was clear that her actions had left a trail of destruction in their wake. Throughout this tumultuous period, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication as the truth about Margaret's actions came to light. I had always suspected that her motives were far from altruistic, and now I had the evidence to support my suspicions. On the other hand, I couldn't help but pity Margaret to some extent. It was clear that her obsession with acquiring my house had driven her to make increasingly risky decisions, and she had become entangled in a web of deceit that was rapidly unraveling. As the legal battle continued to unfold, it became apparent that Margaret was not only facing the loss of the house she had so desperately coveted, but also the potential for criminal charges and financial ruin. Her actions had led her down a treacherous path, one that was now leading her towards a reckoning she could no longer avoid. As the legal battle continued to unfold, Margaret's world began to crumble around her. The authorities had gathered an overwhelming amount of evidence, revealing the extent of her deceitful actions and her involvement in a web of shady financial dealings. The time for reckoning had arrived. The court had taken a strong stance against Margaret's actions, ruling in favor of suspending the sale of my house and restoring my access to the property. The temporary restraining order against her had been upheld, and she was barred from making any further attempts to disrupt my life. With her empire of deception unraveling, Margaret was forced to confront the harsh reality of her situation. Her financial schemes were laid bare for all to see, and the consequences of her actions began to pile up. She faced not only the potential loss of the house she had so desperately wanted, but also the prospect of criminal charges and financial ruin. Margaret's once confident facade began to crumble as she realized the gravity of her predicament. She had underestimated the legal system's ability to uncover her web of lies, and now she was faced with the harsh consequences of her actions. In the courtroom, Margaret's demeanor shifted from arrogance to desperation. She was no longer the triumphant figure who had changed the locks on my house and claimed ownership. Instead, she appeared as a woman backed into a corner, desperately seeking a way out. The legal battle continued to intensify, with both sides presenting their evidence and arguments in court. My lawyer, armed with the truth and a strong case, stood firmly by my side. Margaret's defense, on the other hand, began to crumble under the weight of the evidence against her. As the days turned into weeks and the courtroom drama unfolded, Margaret's once loyal allies began to distance themselves from her. It became clear that her reputation had been tarnished beyond repair, and those who had once supported her now sought to protect themselves from the fallout of her actions. As the legal battle against Margaret reached its climax, the courtroom became the stage where the full extent of her deceit was exposed. The evidence against her was undeniable, and it became clear that justice would ultimately prevail. Throughout the trial, I couldn't help but reflect on the lessons I'd learned from this harrowing experience. My house, once a symbol of my independence and a sanctuary of peace, had been at the center of a tumultuous storm, but it had also taught me valuable life lessons. One of the most profound lessons was the importance of resilience. I had faced unimaginable challenges and obstacles, from the shock of discovering the changed locks to the relentless legal battles that followed. Through it all, I had remained steadfast in my determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The ordeal had also taught me the value of true home. My house was not just a physical structure. It was a place filled with memories, dreams, and a piece of my heart. It was a reminder that home is not just a place where we live, but a reflection of who we are and the life we build. I had also learned the power of seeking justice. Margaret's actions were not only a violation of the law, but also a breach of trust. I had taken a stand to protect my rights and seek redress through the legal system, and it had paid off. Justice had prevailed, and I had reclaimed my home. The courtroom drama eventually came to a close, with the judge ruling decisively in my favor. Margaret was ordered to pay restitution for her actions, and criminal charges were pending against her for her involvement in the fraudulent scheme. Her empire of deceit had crumbled, and she faced the consequences of her choices. As I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of closure washed over me. The house that had been at the center of so much turmoil was once again mine, and I had emerged from the ordeal stronger and wiser. I had learned that even in the face of adversity, resilience, the pursuit of justice, and the value of home could prevail. With the legal battles behind me, and the courtroom drama concluded, Chapter 9 was a chapter of redemption and closure. It marked a new beginning, a return to a semblance of normalcy after the storm that had engulfed my life. Margaret's empire of deceit had crumbled, and she faced the consequences of her actions. She was not only ordered to pay restitution for her fraudulent scheme, but also faced the possibility of criminal charges. Her once loyal allies had distanced themselves from her, leaving her isolated and disgraced. For me, the house that had been at the center of so much turmoil was once again a place of peace and comfort. The locks had been changed back, and the familiar creak of the front door was a welcome sound. It was a symbol of my triumph over adversity, a testament to the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. The house, with its cozy rooms and cherished memories, had been reclaimed. It was no longer tainted by the memory of Margaret's audacious actions, but instead stood as a symbol of my determination to protect what was rightfully mine. In the aftermath of the legal battle, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure and relief. The ordeal had been emotionally and mentally taxing, but it had also been a journey of growth and self-discovery. I had learned valuable lessons about resilience, the pursuit of justice, and the true meaning of home. As I stood in the doorway of my house, looking out at the world beyond, I couldn't help but smile. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there was beauty and hope to be found.